Okay, so that's one thing we don't have to discuss during the meeting, but let's bring this meeting to order. Community Preservation Act Committee. It is now almost 6:15, and we are in the Holyoke City Hall Annex building in the 4th floor conference room. And would you like to introduce yourself to everybody so the audience will know that who you are?
Sure. My name is Meg McGrath-Smith. I've lived in the city for, this is my 12th year. And I had reached out to figure out a way that I could support. I was in support of CPA being passed initially in the city and excited to see that it was moving forward. So I thought I'd reach out and ask how I could support.
Nice. And maybe we should all introduce ourselves just to, so why don't you go ahead and.
Oh, okay, backwards. Okay. So, yes, I'm Amy Landau, as you know, the one staff person here, sort of the project manager for this. So I've been on board since August.
So Rosemary Arnold, I'm representing the Conservation Commission, but I was also the chair for the CPA committee.
Minnie Patch, you know me. I'm the planning board's rep.
And then secretary.
You just want to talk about that.
Libby Hernandez, I'm a member, and I represent the Holyoke Parks and Recreation Department.
I'm Marco Crescentini, and I represent the Holyoke Historical Commission.
Mike Falsetti, Housing.
Kip Foley, I was appointed by the city council.
And Michael is also the vice chair, and, or vice president, or what am I, the
Chair.
chair?
Chair.
I'm chair, okay. Elaine for the chair, and I'm just community representative. So nice to meet you, thank you for coming. Okay, so item 1, acceptance of the minutes, did he give you?
There are no minutes.
Oh,
Ryan has supplied me with drafts, I've just not had time to go over them.
oh, that's too bad, because I did it, and I told him what to do, and he sent them to me too, and I told him what to fix, and then he should have done that, so,
Well,
okay.
I haven't seen
He's got a
what is
few
around
strikes
it.
against him.
Okay, all right, so we'll just have to table that till the next meeting, and he also needs to do the October 1st. October 1st and,
Yeah, I think he sent me a draft of the October 1st ones too.
he did, oh, I didn't see
Yeah.
that, I just saw September.
I can double check this, but
Well, that's okay, no, it's gonna be tabled anyway, so it's all right. Okay, acceptance of treasurer's report, well, we don't have a treasurer here tonight for some, Andrew, man is our treasurer, and I didn't hear from him, so I don't know, I thought he was coming. So I don't know what happened, but we'll have to table that. Discussion and final decisions on eligibility of projects received, and so that's, let's start the discussion. Get our projects out that we originally were given by Amy, and go ahead, Amy, you're gonna,
Oh, okay. Yeah, as I said, I hope everyone got my email. Did everyone get my?
Good job.
Yeah, thank you. Everyone got my email with all?
Yes, that's great.
Okay, great. And just my recommendation that we have more time, that the members take more time to learn about all these intricacies before voting, especially for the tricky ones. And that we also look back at the ones that have already been voted on as yes, now that we have more information.
Okay.
So, let's see, like, I was just going through, you know, what was voted on and, what I learned from Stewart for each of the projects. So we could just go do it that way. And I also did meet with some people from the city solicitor's office. They're a little unsure on how to advise us about deed restrictions, but I can still tell you what they said.
Excuse me, Amy, do you want to, as by way of a roadmap, do you want to use this?
Yeah, I was just gonna go through
Go on.
each one and say what was voted, but what you might wanna rethink. So for the first one, the Boys and Girls Club, Greater Holyoke, the playground at 78 Cosmos Way for $105,000. We're just, the committee voted yes on October 1st. Stewart said that this project sounds like it's an open space rehabilitation project, and not a preservation project. I hope people looked at those definitions, yeah. And that we would need to ensure public access, and a letter is not sufficient under CPA. And that one way is to find out through the city solicitor if we need a permanent restriction, deed restriction on the property. And that's usually something Stuart was saying would have, of the coalition, that would happen if the funding request is for 1 million and up. Since they're asking for 105, because I guess there's an expense, since they're asking for 105,000, we could consider what he called a clawback agreement, which is a contract recorded at the Registry of Deeds, which is maybe less complicated and less expensive. And I guess if they were to, years from now, sell it to the YMCA or whatever, and the YMCA said, well, we didn't agree to that, keeping this open to the public, that it could be, I guess the money could be taken back. But I did talk to the city solicitor's office, and they had never heard of a clawback agreement. They have no idea what that is. I spoke to someone named Chris and to Tasha, and the way Chris laid it out is, he said what they know of is that there could be 3 tiers to think about. The first one is just a contract that would be required, I guess, that if they didn't comply with, we would get the money back, but I guess it's hard to enforce that. The second one he mentioned, which he thought might be the clawback equivalent, is a lien on the property, like a mortgage. I guess that costs $224 from the Registry of Deeds, and it would force them to sell the property to give back the money they owe us.
If they decide to sell it.
If they don't follow that restriction and they don't no longer leave that playground open, if they close the doors or sell it or whatever, if they don't maintain it public access, because that's what we're talking about with the Boys and Girls Club. So it would just give the committee more clout, I guess. And then I guess the third one is the actual deed restriction. But Tasha Martin, I think that's her name, she said she would contact, should I close the door? What?
Open meetings law.
Oh, why, it'll lock us in here?
No,
No.
public.
For the public.
For the open meeting, because people should be able to come in. if they
So
wanted to.
should I just leave
Not
it slightly
Who
open?
is that? There shouldn't be anybody else on the floor.
Should I just, is it okay to just leave it like that?
It's
As long as you
fine.
wouldn't get it now.
Good choice.
So I did tell them that Stuart Sagnor said that Great Barrington did this clawback agreement, and so she contacted someone from Great Barrington CPA and CC'd me on that, so they're gonna try to find out, but anyway, they
It
can,
sounds like they're just talking about what the mechanics would be to enforce it. I mean, the concept is perfectly simple.
Right.
well, it's the confusing part about the lien and what they said is like, they were almost, the way Tasha was presenting it is it almost seems like they thought that that would be part of the funding we would give them, which that doesn't seem right, that, that some of the money we're giving them would go towards what they are required to do for the application, which should be something they do.
Yeah.
But the way that it's done, like I thought, okay, when they're presented with this, contract, they have to sign something and, we sign something, or the committee signs something, but what's odd is that the lien kind of happens later. So that's the part that, that's why there was some confusion of like, I don't know, Tasha seemed to be saying, well, you can exchange the money with them at the same moment that they pay for the lien. But I don't know, that just sounds so complicated, and I think we're also gonna talk to Alicia, Office of Community Development, because she's probably done this before too. So anyway, this thing that I'm discussing, I think impacts not just open space, but also, historic buildings, because, the idea of a historic restriction, so.
Can I just ask a question? Oh.
Amy, it's the Hoyle Boys and Girls Club, that parking lot that park is open right now. It's never closed.
That's not, yeah.
No, that's okay. So we have to put, if we give them the money, part of this fine print is that it always must remain open to the public. And if, should you decide to sell the property, and the new owner decides to put a parking lot in, we want the money back. Would that be correct? Am I correct in what that is? Just so I can understand.
Well, I don't know, what you're saying is kind of vague. I mean, it depends on which route the committee decides to go for.
No, but the basic principle, I think, is pretty clear, and I think the answer is yes. We can only legally give them this money if we are guaranteed that it's used for something that will be open to the public in perpetuity.
Right.
So we just need a mechanism to allow us to recoup the funds if for some reason that it isn't. And I would think there would be something easier, and maybe we could bond for it, the way we ask
I
applicants.
think
to bond
it's
for
when we do
approval.
the contract, when it's time to do the contract.
make
We're
that
gonna do
be
a
a-
contract with all these people.
But it's
I
not
mean-
just in the case of them selling it, it's also if they
They
decide,
sell.
we
Yeah.
want to close this just for camp programs. I'm not saying that they have to have it
So-
open all day long, because
Yeah.
even the Parks Department sometimes closes the park, so it doesn't have to be open 24 hours to the
Right.
public, but.
So can I suggest maybe we think about shifting the burden of that condition to the applicant to say, listen, this is the process, and if you're going to apply for this money, you need to propose something that's gonna work to assure that there's public access. Let them figure it out.
I don't
Absolutely.
know, that's not really how every CPA committee determines what their expectations are on the application. If you leave it up to the applicant.
Well, why? If they, I mean,
Then there's
Then
not,
we're not
then
gonna
there's,
give them the money then.
right, then they don't get the money.
Yeah, but then you're just, I don't know, I just think
Wait,
that's too unclear.
can I just say one thing here? I think we're jumping the gun. I
Yes.
mean, we're only doing eligibility here, not, we're getting into the final full application, and we don't have to do that
Well,
yet.
but the problem is, as soon as we say this is eligible, they're gonna say, come back to me and say, well, how do I do the application? That's great, how do I do it? And I need to be able to tell them what the committee wants. And I don't think that we can just say, oh, you just prove in your own way that you're gonna do
No, But we
this.
probably can take
Yes.
middle ground.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe there's a reason this doesn't work, but I would think that, following Kip's suggestion, our application can basically be refined to say, all right, for this kind of project, we need to be assured under the law that this property will always be reasonably open to the public. Please, as part of your application, demonstrate to us what, or how you will structure this deal should you get this funding, so that the city is assured that the public will always have
Well,
access.
My concern
Here
is,
are some examples.
we're always gonna be coming up against this same issue, so I think it's better for the committee to have a policy, and this is what Stuart has
but
said,
that is the policy.
That is gonna be our policy.
just to let them come up with
Absolutely.
some
Propose
kind
the
of promise.
security that they're gonna have public access. How are we gonna do this? How are they gonna provide us with the certainty that there will be public access, and in the event that either the property sells or they deny public access, how is that going to be dealt with? They're gonna return them, maybe that's a contract, maybe there's an agreement that they propose that says,
Or maybe it's part of the CPA proposition that, that it will, and that's
Right,
basically
and if
what we're
there's-
saying, it will always
and if they
be open,
propose
or
something
you don't get the
in their
money.
application that doesn't provide the committee with certainty that they're going to comply with that, then they're not likely to get approved for funding.
But that's also something that we can review in the public
Right.
review process,
Right.
because they're gonna have to come and present their application. And, maybe I'm picturing this wrong, but I'm picturing it as being a little bit like what happens in site plan review. Somebody will come in with a whole set of documents that they spent a lot of time putting together, and then the planning board will go over it, or properly planning staff will, and then look at it. But at that point, we start asking questions. What about this driveway? What if it does this to traffic? We don't, we're not confident this is going to really work. We need, for instance, for you to give us a bond against removal of these solar panels
Exactly.
if you go bankrupt and you want to walk away, we need to know that there's money to get rid of them.
Right.
And this is all stuff where, sometimes the project proponent will come back and say, well, no, that won't work for me, but what about if I give you this equipment that is guaranteed by the
Right.
manufacturer?
Right,
And we can negotiate conditions.
right,
Because I think there'll be some where it's absolutely cut and dry. We have to have the deed restriction,
right.
we have to have an outside plane permit. And then there are gonna be these middle grounds where maybe they can satisfy us in some simpler way than we would necessarily specify.
Well, what if they say, well, we want to submit a letter? I know
Then we
already.
say-
And you're not likely to get funded.
Then we say, no, that's not good enough, we need security under the law. We need a legal guarantee that this is
I mean,
gonna open.
I'm sorry, but in particular with the Boys Club, I mean, that's one of the projects that I grabbed, and I'm assuming that, you know, part of my facilitating their application is communicating this to them. Like, I don't have the answer to exactly what, you know, what does the Boys Club as a proponent suggest for providing us with some security that if we get this funding, that there will be public access in perpetuity. And if the property sells, what will they do? If they close the gates, what will happen? I mean, how, and let them answer. I don't think it's our job to solve all the applicants' problems. It's more to communicate, hey, this is where, in my experience, the view of the board is gonna be. You need to be aware of this.
But to Amy's point, I think we also have to have some bottom lines here, like no, a letter is not sufficient. We
Right.
need,
Right.
you need to understand that either you do this forever or the money has to come back to us.
Right.
How are you gonna make sure that money is there?
Well, Amy,
Well, that's just not what,
Yeah.
you know, Stuart was suggesting.
well, Amy, I mean, like, I guess we're all saying, if you could contact the Hoyle Boys Club person, Eileen Callahan, say, Eileen, we think you've got a good idea, but by law, we must have something that's in the contract for you to be eligible that says there'll be public access in perpetuity. And if you decide to sell it, and the new owner says, I'm gonna make it a parking garage, we want the money back. I mean, there's two things we have to, would that be okay? I mean,
I think Kip just said that he will have contact
Oh.
with them.
I mean, I think
So
that,
he'll
maybe
give
I'm
them
wrong.
good information. Kip said.
I think that that's part of, isn't that what we were doing when we
Yeah.
were?
I agree.
Which
I've
project,
contacted
some of it
all
is
the
to be the
ones I have.
liaison to that
okay.
applicant and to say, hey, I think it's a great project, but in order to
We
get
need
the
a few
number
more
of,
pieces.
a recommendation, you have to address this
Yeah.
issue.
Good idea.
And they said, oh, we'll just write a letter. Well, I don't think the board's, they will vote for funding with just a letter.
But before we move on, I think Amy raised a point that, about what Stuart was saying, and, or you said, I mean, did Stuart basically say what other committees do is have like 3 mechanisms that they insist on all the time?
No, those 3 tiers I was talking about came from the city solicitor here. But he said we need to ensure public access, a letter's not acceptable, we should talk to our city solicitor, and we need either a permanent restriction on the property, or something called a clawback agreement. So,
Okay.
Which is probably a contract that says
Yeah,
if
so
you deny
we're
public
basically-
access, you've got to pay us back.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we're on the same page here, I was just,
So that's all
we
the
don't need that
information.
until they do the full application.
Right.
I mean, we
We
can
don't
still
need it for
approve them,
eligibility, right.
we can still approve them for eligibility at this point in time, and then when it comes time for the,
We give them more specifics.
yes.
Right.
And all the
After Kip
information.
and Amy have spoken to them, they'll know what they need to have.
well,
When it
I
comes
need to
time for
find
the-
out from all of you what they need to have, so, that's.
Well,
The two things.
well, right now, we don't know, all we know is what you brought up to us, and we don't know the full application. When we see the full application, then we'll see what's missing.
If we
But
don't
I'm
know that,
sure they're
they'll
gonna
submit
ask
one.
me, what should we do, you know, for our application to show that? And they're gonna expect us to.
Well, then
But
that's
you mean, what
an
kind of
answer.
mechanism do we need to?
some legally binding arrangement whereby
Yes.
either the land is encumbered so that there will always be public access, or the event of a cessation of public access triggers a right on our part to recover the funds spent. And that trigger would then have to be backed up by some sort of security arrangement, I would think. That's where Tasha is talking about the lien coming from. You know, the point of the
That's
lien
what the
is,
city does, they put
That's-
liens on
that was
property,
Chris.
and we could do that, we can do liens,
but
it's
it's
just
not
as
the,
simple.
yeah, I think our point is it's not the only way of getting there. It's
No.
one
Right.
way of getting there.
No, but I think it's maybe the simplest.
Well, but that lien doesn't
But
take
that-
care of in the event that they were to deny public access but not sell the property, right? Because the lien is only gonna be, you only can enforce the lien if you're trying to transfer the property. So that's great if you wanna insure against that protection, but if you're just, a lien isn't gonna stop them from throwing a lock on the gate and
Okay.
saying, or turning it back into a parking lot, it's not transferring hands, so.
But something like a bond would function as a clawback agreement, basically. The triggering
Right.
event happens and the bond
Yeah.
goes out.
You know, but that's,
Silly, but-
I mean, that's a good option for some people, it may not be a good option for them, because now the bond
Yeah.
has to be guaranteed by somebody, and now
Yeah,
they're
now,
tying up
it
their
is an
fine.
expense.
So that's why with all these varieties of ways to secure that, I think the proponents should propose how they're proposing what works for them, with the understanding that the more secure it is, the more likely they are to get funding. If it's not very secure, they're not likely to get
So if
funding.
they call you and
If
ask
it's
you
not
that,
secure,
and
we
you
can't
tell
have
them
them.
that they are responsible for
If
finding
they're not,
out.
if it's not sufficiently secure, if I'm understanding Amy's
Right.
presentation,
Yeah.
we can't do it even if we want to.
It's against the law.
It has to be absolutely secure or else.
I
Yes,
didn't
so
know that.
if they call you, Amy, you just say to them, listen, you know, this is what you have to secure for us.
Always has to be open to the public.
Yeah, yeah.
This is what you have to secure for us, that, you know, that's always gonna be open to the public. So you find a legal way that you're gonna present to us that's gonna show us that. That's what you say to them. You don't have to give them the answer just of what exactly that mechanism might be. I mean, you know, it's because it's gonna be different for
'Cause it-
every
right, different
project.
circumstances, different-
It's gonna be different, so
Right.
how can you have one specific way to tell them, oh, okay, well, we want a lead, or we want this, or we want that, because some of them it might not work for them, they might be able to do something else.
And Stuart would, if that were the case, you would think Stuart would have, this
Yeah,
is
why
how you
didn't
do
he
it.
tell us? Yeah.
Like, if it's as simple as putting the thing, then, oh, here's the way 25 other communities have been similar circumstances, funded private property with CPA funds for open space and recreation. This is the document that we make them use.
Right. That would be very, I was thinking the same thing. He said that, he said to you, what was it that he
Go to
told
the city
you?
solicitor.
No, he said to you, in the beginning, what you mentioned in the beginning, he said that a letter wouldn't do, and I said,
Right.
okay,
Right.
so a letter won't do what will do
Right.
then, but he didn't offer
No,
that.
he said, go to the city solicitor and ask
Yeah.
them.
Well,
I don't
he
know.
he did say, they'll say either a permanent restriction or or you could do something like a clawback.
So-
But he made it seem like the CPAs decide what their criteria is. They don't just, leave it up to the applicant to come
Well,
up.
we will eventually be deciding though, because even if we say, all right, how do you propose to do this?
Mhm.
Then we're still going to be making the final
That's
determination, I think, with the help of the city solicitor's office about, all right, does this proposed mechanism work?
Uh-huh.
And I would be surprised if Stuart wasn't using clawback to refer to a wide variety of mechanisms that have the effect of clawing things back.
Well, do you still think it's worth though because I think Tasha's gonna follow up and they're doing a little research, it would still be valuable.
Oh, sure.
Absolutely.
Oh, sure.
The more
Absolutely.
information, the
Absolutely.
better.
Yeah, sure. Meg, do you have do you have any ideas of?
Just listening.
Just to see?
Well, do you want to take a vote? How do you want to move
Feel
on
free to
this?
chime in.
Well,
So you're gonna stick to the yes vote then for that?
Well,
I wouldn't change any of
let's put
that.
it this way, I'm
I
okay
think-
with that now, but I wanna find out if you guys are okay. I'm okay with leaving
I
things the
think
way they are, but
I'm totally okay with
if
it.
and only if we were all agreed here, and I think we are, that our determinations are provisional on eligibility.
Mhm.
And all of our determinations now are basically, we think probably that if your complete application may demonstrate that you're not actually eligible.
Well, That's not actually what Stuart suggested, and he was saying that it's better not to, because even if we have to go, say, if it's Maple Street, for example, and say to them, you know, we did say you were eligible, but we're just learning, and we've discovered that this really isn't something we're ready to take on. We can explain it by saying, we apologize, but we're saving you time, because then you won't have to create this very lengthy application that we know already will be rejected. So that's what he was pointing out, you know, that even if, yes, it'll be a disappointment to some of these applicants that they were voted yes, in the end, if they understand that it will save them time, why should they be under the illusion, you know?
Yeah,
Well,
I'm not sure
because-
how that differs from what I just said.
Oh, I thought you were just saying, go ahead and.
No, I say,
Oh.
no, only if we make it clear that this is not a final determination because we don't have enough information to say for sure.
So preliminary.
Oh, well, I thought you were saying we don't have enough information because they haven't done the full application.
Well,
Yes.
Yeah.
That
But
is
what I'm
it.
saying is we don't want people to do the full application.
Why?
Why?
But they're going to be, if the
well,
committee
if we know in
knows
advance that they're not gonna be,
But they
We
are.
don't
Right,
know
in this
that.
They
case,
are.
yes.
But we
We
don't know
don't
that.
Well-
know that. Nobody has made,
Well,
and
In
that's,
my email, I laid down some things about, you know, whether the committee should think about if they want to accept private owner applications, because that opens a can
Another
of
group.
worms.
But this one's not.
No, this one's not,
No,
but I'm
no,
just,
but-
I'm talking broadly now about
Right.
having voted yes on something and then maybe rethinking it.
I mean, it's my opinion, the eligibility bar is very low. If they meet the
Right.
form and it says that these projects are eligible, then they're eligible. Now we go to the next round, they're gonna submit, we don't know how many applications we're gonna get. Everybody who submitted an eligibility form may not submit an application. We don't know how we're gonna feel about any of these applications and whether we're allocating money. We might have a lot of money. Someone may come in, a private property owner like Maple Street may come in and make a very compelling argument for funding of theirs. Why would we disqualify that now out of the gate when we have no idea what we're gonna vote on any of these things? It's like, if they've achieved eligibility, let them put in that, and this is the same case with public access. Show us you're gonna provide public access. Show us there's public good to funding of your project that you're proposing. It's a very competitive process. There's way more applicants than there is a pool of money. I don't think any single applicant is sitting there saying, you know, I'm a shoo-in for funding on this thing. I'm gonna do the work of putting together the application. They put it in, they're submitting it, it's a competitive process. We're gonna evaluate all of these different factors, and at the end of the day, we're gonna use our best judgment to vote on each and every one of them. I don't think it's, at this point, we should be weeding through which ones we wanna encourage and discourage and make a blanket, well, we're not gonna do any funding of private property out of the CPA funds because that has a risk of opening the floodgate. It's like, just take them as they come, they're eligible, right? They meet the eligibility form.
No, they don't. I mean, what was,
Not all.
Maybe we should
but-
keep going through.
Yeah.
but there's two components again, guys. I mean, the two components is it doesn't meet the law because it doesn't ensure public access. And if they sell the property,
Well, that's just for open space. That's
Well,
not
no,
an
but-
open space project.
Right.
no,
No, historic preservation and restoration can do that too.
rehabilitation. That was the thing that.
You're thinking of
The Boy Scout.
flats?
No, the Boy Scout.
Oh, the Boy Scout.
The Boy Scout property. I'm just sticking to around the Boy Scout property.
Yeah.
So the two things that came to my mind, and the two things are, it's always gotta be open to the public, and if you sell the thing, or, we gotta talk to somebody, they gotta honor your agreement, if not, we want the money back.
But that's not eligibility, that's part of the
That's part of the
application. I mean, we'll
contract.
never fund it if they're not guaranteeing those things.
Right.
But that is part of the eligibility. You can't break the. you
No,
can't-
no, it's not part of the eligibility. It's part of the next phase. So
Right.
they're allowed to put their application in, because at this point, it meets all the requirements. The next phase will tell we need more information, and we know how you're gonna do it, and these are the stipulations that we're telling you
Put it
have to be
different way.
met.
Put it a different way, these are defects, but they're easily curable defects. Because they're easily curable defects in eligibility, I would argue that it makes sense not to hold them up and give them a preliminary, yes, you can cure the problems we've seen, and therefore you can move ahead, as opposed to a theoretical application where we look at it and it's clear that there's no way you can fix this. This is not eligible.
Right.
Well, then, oughtn't we,
This is a good project.
I agree, but.
Then let's move them to the next phase.
Oughtn't we tell them, before we even go to the next phases, you have to have these two answers, have to be answered.
Not in this phase, not now. That's what kids-
That's what I
That's what
think
kids
our,
Or-
my
or
role
maybe-
and
maybe-
Amy's role at this point is to say, listen,
We need more information.
knock yourself out putting this application together, but understand, a serious concern of the committee and in the law says, this has to be guaranteed that it's gonna be open space.
You're gonna communicate that to them.
There-
Communicate that.
Right,
Exactly.
Okay,
But
so
now-
then we move them along to the next phase.
Right.
And then they decide whether they want to submit an application or not. They probably do. If I were them, I probably would call the
It's a
solicitor's
simple-
office and say, hey, this is what I'm proposing
Simple process.
as security. What do you guys, what does the city solicitor think? Because I know it's gonna come into this committee, and the committee's probably gonna go to the solicitor's office and say, is this sufficient in we need a legal opinion, this is sufficient security in order for it to qualify for funding.
Okay, we should tell them that, we should tell the
Yes.
principal that, so
I
they answer
agree.
it properly.
That's
Yeah.
part of the
I
process.
agree.
Yeah, well, that
We
has
should
to be
inform
warned.
them of that,
Yes.
those two concerns.
Yes.
Yes.
That will be
Yes.
part.
That being said, Elaine, would you want to have Amy or Kip convey that through a letter?
No, no,
Talk to them.
they're gonna talk to them, I mean,
Or,
Don't-
okay,
don't-
talk to
yeah,
them.
don't worry about how this is gonna
You'll
work out. It's, all we're doing is telling them you're eligible to go on to the next
Yeah,
phase.
I believe
And
they
then
are.
they're gonna ask
I have
questions
questions.
and they're gonna
Right.
communicate with them.
And let me just say, like, my past experience on the CPA committee was when applicants came in and we were trying to decide who, there was so many factors that were involved. What's their ability to actually execute this if they get funded? Do they have other funds that they need? Do they have the expertise? What's the ranking of the public benefit of this project versus the other ones? Do we want to wipe out, do we want to spend all of it in our first year? Or do we want to be cautious in our first year? Like, all of these things are going to be considered and voted upon. And I think to spend too much time finding one factor among many and saying, well, this we will or won't want to do. It's a moving, fluid process.
You're right.
Yeah, I totally thought that this is eligible. I was talking broadly though about the other ones,
Right.
but you were on a CPA committee before you?
Yes,
For what city you were?
Town of Hadley,
Oh, okay, that's good to know.
a while ago.
So you have some experience.
I mean, it's changed quite a bit. It's a lot more bureaucratic than it
The
was
only
when I
thing I
did.
want to mention though, also about this project is that everything that they, add to this, that they do to rehabilitate this space has to be a permanent fixture that's part of the land, or it can't be a portable object that can be removed. So like the shot clock, that's okay if it's fixed. So that's important to keep in mind. It's a capital improvement.
Okay.
And that again.
All right, so what's your pleasure? Shall we go over each one separate again and decide if we still wanna go yes?
So that was still a yes.
But we need to.
So you need to vote?
Yeah, well, make a motion that that's still gonna be a yes.
I motion to accept the Boys and Girls
Second.
to move forward.
Okay, any other discussion? All in favor?
Can
Okay,
I ask a question?
sure.
Are we gonna go through all of these
Well, I
again?
just asked that, and they said yes, they wanted to do each one.
Well, hopefully with not that much.
Right.
Hopefully we got
Rapidly.
a lot of that down on the first one.
Yeah.
Yeah, the next one,
I'm
I can help on the next
at
one.
The next one
The next one is dead simple, right?
seems
This one
pretty
is
straightforward.
It's very
Yeah.
simple.
Project.
It stays,
Yeah.
The big thing that I learned about this, sorry,
go ahead, no, go ahead.
is that, that it doesn't have to be something that has public access, it has to have public benefit.
Yes.
So this is conservation land that protects the watershed and wetlands and forest land, so it has public benefit. And Kestrel Trust is,
And this one actually will have, people will be able to use it, and it will be perpetually, in place. So, some of them in the future may not be, but this one is open to the public.
Yeah, this one just strikes me as a no-brainer.
Yeah. So moved.
Okay,
How's that, huh?
Second, is there a second?
Discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Next one, to
okay,
the
so
historic.
this is the Maple Street revitalization one we touched on before, and the committee voted yes before. There was some question about the fact that it's a private owner. When I spoke to Stuart, he said, yes, it's eligible, basically, but we should absolutely need a historic restriction on the building, because otherwise there's no benefit to the city without it. Also, the committee may choose, this is what I mentioned before, he said that the committee may choose not to accept private property owners, because once you open the door to that, you get flooded with them. Cambridge has their own commission just to deal with this type of application. So he was saying, and like I was recommending that not to accept private property CPA funding for the first funding cycle, since it's not high on the CPA plan priorities, which is something Stuart also pointed out to think about. I know it's, that the committee voted yes on it already, and,
Yeah, my problem with this is, if we could go back in time 6 months and vote there not to accept private property for a first round application cycle, I would have been all in favor of it. But having opened the application process to private owners this time, I don't see how we can suddenly turn around and say, no, wait, we said that you were eligible to apply, but now that you've applied, we've changed our minds.
well, that was what he was bringing up, that we could just say, we want to save you the time and effort that would be required to put this application together,
Well,
But
I
if you
think
feel
it's-
differently, that's fine, I'm just telling you what he told me, so.
Yeah, no, I think it would be perfectly fair to talk to people and say, look, here are the realities, here's what you're competing with, here is, things like the historic restriction, which even if we gave you the money, you would have to then accept this burden on your property forever. And under all of the circumstances, and given who you're competing with for our limited funds, you may not consider it worth your time to go forward. And let them make the decision.
He was here too, and he listened, and we mentioned that he might have to do this historic restriction.
And
And
he was
he
deep
was like, oh,
Not
he
sure you wanted to
wasn't
do
sure
it.
he wanted to do it, so,
Okay.
yeah, so. he
Yeah,
just-
and that's a very intense, that's the most
Yeah.
complicated
And
category.
I did talk to him, considerably on the phone, but that was never mentioned, so, I think that, that could be a problem for him.
I philosophically, I don't like giving public money to private people for any reason.
Well, my only thing on this one is after talking to him for a long time and being, it's a beautiful building and it's historically valued. It's right across from the library and he just wants to make those improvements and make it a better place. But because we're right at the beginning of our determination as how we proceed, there's so many more buildings that are owned by the city or part of the city that
That's right.
need restoration and are part of the application. So in the future, maybe when we're looking for applicants, then we open it up to some more
Good idea.
lenient.
You guys, Madam Chairman, you want to have a vote on this now to, at this point in time, we're not going to entertain that application?
I'll open it up, yes, I'll open it up, does somebody want to make that motion?
How do we do
I
that?
don't
mean,
know.
It's eligible. I mean, look,
I-
if I were them, I would be looking and say, my shot at getting this is pretty slim.
Right.
Private
but
property, first go around, compete, very competitive
I'll
process.
just say right now, we're not in a position to
So
do that.
I would approach it differently. I would say he's eligible,
Mhm.
and this is what we're looking for you to be part of that project. And one of them is that we need to place a historic restriction on it. And so we put in place, if we give you this funding, then this is what we need as a due diligence from you. And if you can't do that, or if he chooses not to, then he eliminates himself.
And also mention what you were saying to me about who he's competing with.
Yeah, and I think that we are better off letting him make the decision
Right.
than saying, we won't even entertain this.
Mhm.
Particularly since we put out a document saying, hey guys, you may be eligible.
Exactly.
Or you may not be.
Or
And, well,
you may not
but
be,
but
but
they,
what you're proposing here is not that we claim that he's ineligible, because
Right.
he is eligible. But then we
Yes.
say, we don't care if you're eligible, we're not going to fund you anyway, which is a whole different thing.
yes,
We're saying,
I agree.
if you want to move forward,
Process.
these are
I
the
don't
things
think
that you
so.
need to do in order to move your project forward.
You can say no.
Oh, I intend
Right
to.
at this point in time.
I intend to. I'm not gonna vote for it.
Yeah, but I think it's eligible. None of us may.
And we're voting on
fund it,
whether it's
but-
gonna be, it's eligible.
Right.
And that's
Not funded.
Yeah.
not
Right,
fine,
but
but
just
just
Right.
eligible. Okay, so, would someone like to make a motion that it's eligible?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
Second.
any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
No?
Opposed?
Okay, one nay. Okay,
And
Did you
just,
vote?
Yes.
Oh, you said aye.
can I get a rationale for the minutes on that note?
At this point in time, we have more public needs for the overall public than for a particular singular project.
But that goes to the merits, it doesn't go to the eligibility of the project.
Well, by definition, I don't like, my premise is I don't like using public money for private, in this particular application, for private.
But that's
for
not
private
part
use.
of the law.
I don't care if it's part of the
Okay.
law.
Yeah.
But that's right.
I'm
Okay.
voting
you
no. I
have
don't
to
care.
accept what he says,
What do you
that's why
think?
he's voting no.
Cool, I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure that I got that
So you
right
get the
for the
minutes.
records.
Yes.
So if anybody asks, we know why.
Let them talk to me.
Okay.
I mean, I
Yes,
totally
just tell
see
them
your
to talk.
point. I think that the whole eligibility question is kind of complicated because, yeah, if you look on the face of it, it's just either eligible or not based on, you know, all these things.
Certain
But on the
criteria.
other hand, it seems like the way Stuart was defining it, eligibility can be interpreted in different ways, so, you know.
So that's right, it's up to
Yeah.
us to
Well,
interpret.
I also think, next year is different. It may
Right.
be that
We'll be more
after this,
experienced.
we will be able to say, okay,
Right.
here's our pot of money,
Mhm.
and maybe we want to put a hiatus on certain kinds of applications, and maybe we have a legal rationale to do it.
Mhm.
I'm just very uncomfortable with changing the rules for
Okay.
applications in midstream.
Okay.
All right, so let's move on to the next one,
Okay.
Wow.
Flats Community Building Headquarters, 43 Canal Street.
This is the ha-ha one, right?
This was tabled, yeah, and
Okay.
they hoped to get 75,000. There was a concern that it might not be historic. We haven't really looked into that completely. Stuart said this falls under rehabilitation, not preservation, and that it sounds like it's mostly about maintaining the building for community purposes. And if this is maintenance, and I think Mike brought this up, then it's not allowable, because it must fit the capital improvements, definition. Wait, is this the right one?
Yeah, I think this is fiber optic,
Yes.
and the one where what they want to restore the building to is not its original state to
Oh,
begin with.
correct.
If it's about rehabilitating historic features on the exterior, it might be allowable, but that's unclear. But maintenance is not allowable, if it's just maintenance, like, you know.
My impression is that this one may genuinely not be eligible, because there was that
Yeah.
question about the original building not having the stucco face that they want to restore.
Correct. You'd have to take, all those blocks were built at the same time. So you have to take the stucco off, repoint the brick, and bring it back to 19th century row house. It doesn't look like a 19th century row house.
And certainly the stuff like the fiber optic,
Yeah, I don't know about that.
yeah, and that's,
That's kind of, That's nothing, that's not that's addition, that's the rehabilitating.
It is, yeah, they wanted to do this under historic.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, I think this one,
I think if they wanted to restore, if they wanted to tear down the stucco and hire an architect and bring it back to its 19th century look, that's historic preservation.
Right.
But to put stucco, I mean, no, I mean, it's not.
Well, stucco can be historic.
Yeah, if the rest of the buildings were just.
Oh, it's not?
yeah,
No.
that's the point.
It's
It's the
the,
stucco over the old.
Oh, okay.
I'm
So
trying to
it's
find
double-
it, but there was a piece in the guidelines from the interior, Secretary of the Interior, where they
Yeah, I
talked
think
about
I've
the fact
done
that
this twice.
a building could have had a significant change along the way that was part of its historical character that evolved.
Oh.
by
Which,
definition,
it
go ahead.
may be in this case, that this does not qualify underneath that, but that was actually mentioned in here, that at some point, you know, if the building is 400 years old, or
Right.
it's had multiple lives, at a certain point, you wouldn't say, let's like take the, you know, the back 8 rooms off that old colonial that just kept expanding, you would
Right.
see it as its own kind of historical
Like a
record.
reformation.
So I'm not saying it's
The
necessarily true in this case, but.
1946 conversion of the 1840s row house, it doesn't say that that's when the stucco went on, though. It just, the conversion into a social club happened in 1946.
Yeah, when the Portuguese, maybe, you know, stucco and, that's a Portuguese building. The stucco is a Portuguese flavor to the building. The row house is English, 19th century London, Manchester factory housing. That's the 1846 variety. The Portuguese put on the building that reflects Portuguese character, which is stucco. I mean, if you go to Spain or Portugal, they have
Yeah.
stucco all over the place. I mean, I've never been there, but it's cool.
Marco, did you have any conversation with him?
I did not.
No.
I didn't have an opportunity to. I did write down Chris Scully, State Historical Preservation Officer, ask about the significant.
Yeah, I think that's what we need on this,
All
yeah.
right,
We need someone to give us, to tell us if this is still historical or not.
Okay.
And we can't guess that, we don't know, so.
Alright, so I'm sorry for not coming prepared, but I'll
No,
look
no,
at
that's
that.
okay, it's not your fault, because we were hoping he was gonna be here, that gentleman.
But this one would still be, it'll require further review anyway, because a great deal of what they want to do sounds like it is in fact
Exactly,
maintenance,
yeah.
and we can't.
The
do
outside
that.
is one
maintenance.
thing, but then the
Maintenance,
rehabilitation
not
part was,
So table this to our next meeting?
yeah.
So we'll,
So, you know, just
Okay,
like
go ahead.
read the language of it, so this is from the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation. Says those properties change over time, those changes that have acquired historic significance in their own right shall be retained and preserved.
But
who determines that? Local Historic Commission?
Yeah.
Stand down.
Okay.
What do you think?
Yeah, I'm very familiar with that because your first example of an older building that then gets additions and then additions, and somebody might decide, we're gonna remove the 20th century additions, but we're gonna keep from this point on. So I know a lot of people will choose a period that the particular structure best represents, whether it, you know, is from its first 100 years or, so that stucco could have taken on enough character of its own. And you could decide that that is historic enough, and then you don't have to go retro to a previous life. But
Is that the decision you guys have to make?
He just needs to inform them.
Yeah.
Well,
So you might-
ultimately, it's, if the Historic Commission says, yeah, we're with you, then they can say to us, hey,
Yeah.
Historic said.
Well, a letter from
Yeah,
them
we
would
need
be
a letter.
helpful. A letter
Yeah.
from the
So
historical.
am I seeking some guidance from the Holyoke Historical Commission or from Chris Scully of the
I
state?
would do both. I mean,
Wait,
you know,
who's
because
Chris
then, I mean, Chris.
So they checked yes to the question, is a resource in a local historic
It is.
district?
Yes, it is.
It is?
It is, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so, you know, that
But
gentleman.
what I read, I thought it was not part of Hadley
I
Falls.
know.
Well, when I looked this up in Macris, it said it seemed that it was not part of the Hadley Falls housing district.
I don't think it is.
So I'm not sure.
It is.
Well, it's right,
Portuguese club?
It's just Center Street
yeah,
there.
the
that
Portuguese
is-
Club.
Yeah, it's in Center
It's
Street.
Center Street that's the Hadley Falls, and they did build some things on Canal Street, but it wasn't part of the same, it was a different
It's the
project.
whole neighborhood though, it's like, you're thinking, well, anyway.
It's where the Portuguese, they
Well,
had a real presence there.
yes.
Oh,
And
they
so
definitely did.
historically,
Yes.
that is
Yeah.
historic to them, yes.
Yeah.
So they just need to,
Go
we
ahead.
just need to get more information on, is that historically valued by the historical commission?
The stucco, or no, they have to go back.
But if
to
it's in the district, right? It's,
I don't know
Or-
if that's part of it or not, it may not be part
Yeah.
of it, it
well,
might be on the
now I would
edge.
say that applicants should be told, make sure you prove to us
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
because
these
they
things
have to
are,
prove that,
that
Yeah,
this
so
thing
that's the
is,
first
meets the
thing.
criteria.
Yeah, exactly,
yeah, and if they can't, then it's not eligible.
right.
Well,
Can I just ask Megan, under what you saw, so that could also include because they also mentioned exterior signage and lighting befitting the neighborhood and legacy of the building. So like signage would be part of that, possibly.
It would just be really hard to know
Yeah.
unless they actually give us details. And that gets into the application phase too, because then we actually have to go line by line through the guidance from nature and just say, would those signs actually meet that criteria?
We need more details,
okay.
So more information.
yeah, we need more, yeah, so, do we need more information at this point, or do we wait and approve them for now and let them go through into the next phase? That's the question.
There's two.
I mean, or shall we wait to, Marco, for you to check with the historical commission and then get back to us and then we can decide?
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, Mr.
all
Boss.
right, we'll keep that table then.
Okay.
All right,
Okay.
Which,
So I think the next three
Stained glass.
probably goes,
Yes.
the stained glass, the Smith's Ferry Cemetery, and the annex lanterns. You all voted yes to
Yes.
that?
Yeah.
Yes.
is that the consensus, we wanna keep those three,
Yes.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and then,
Victory Theater.
yeah, okay, the Victory Theater seems pretty straightforward as a yes.
What was that for?
The Victory Theater, you had already, the committee already voted yes, and seems like that's still. Stands, as a yes.
Yeah, because the building has been declared historical, so we know that.
And the same with the, let's see, for the music room, I found out, of the Wisteria Hearst Museum, I found out that electrical upgrades sound fine. They must do capital improvements only, so they couldn't build a modern stage with fancy lighting, since that's not historic rehabilitation. They couldn't buy an amplifier, because that's equipment. So 10% of what they want may not be valid, but some of it sounds like it would be, so.
Okay.
This sounds like it, they just need a little guidance in the process of the
Yeah.
city fund.
I would vote yes.
Yeah.
What do you guys think? And Madam Chair,
Yes.
make a motion that we approve Bell Skinner music room.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and then next, we're getting into more
The train
difficult
station.
ones. The trains, Richardson train station, the committee voted yes, and I spoke to Stuart, he said, again, this sounds more like a rehabilitation project, not preservation, and it could be eligible, but they must reframe the language in the full application, because, they can't, they have to ask for money to rehabilitate the building itself, contingent upon finding a developer who would do the work satisfying the city terms, because the CPA doesn't just deposit cash into a developer incentive fund, which sounds like that's what they're looking for. And it seems like all three of those projects by this applicant, the state, that this one in the Armory and 123 Pine Street satisfy historic requirements, which are complicated. But I didn't get to ask Stuart about this. I noticed that with one, they're more specific. I think it's this one, they say pre-development activities. And when I look through the CPA examples on the, state coalition website, it seems like pre-development activities don't appear under historic very often. I didn't see an example of that. I saw that under affordable housing. So this one, so that, at first I thought, okay, well, maybe they're eligible, they just need to reframe the language, but I'm not sure about the pre-development activities, which could be anything from, like a financial or feasibility study to a design and engineering study, that kind of thing.
We did sit down with Marcos and with John Dijak a week and a half ago.
Yeah, right.
And I think they understand the difficulties with making things fit under the CPA guidelines. They're also very willing to work with us to make the applications as consistent as they can be and make sure that things are eligible. And we came away with a strong impression, I think, that ideally, even if we don't allocate a penny to these projects, it would be helpful to the city and to the Office of Planning and Economic Development for us to determine that the projects are eligible in some form, so that potential developers know that money from the CPA for appropriate projects would be potentially available to them. So, on that basis, I would be prepared to say, let's go forward with these. They understand that these are going to have to be shaped to meet the requirements of the CPA, and they'll work with us. And if we don't fund them, we don't fund them. And there may be problems.
So they're learning like we are.
They're learning like we are.
Yes.
And the other thing about this that I'd like to inquire about further, because we just didn't get there during this meeting, and it's one of those questions I didn't even consider until some days later, is what happens if you're doing this kind of complex project and we've said, all right, we'll allocate say $100,000 toward this, the Richardson train station, because this appears to be a project that will restore and preserve the building exterior, which is a legitimate CPA mechanism. The project goes forward and we wind up with a transformed train station that is good for the city but that no longer has its historic features. Do we do a clawback on that or what?
Well, they have to fulfill the Secretary of Interior's,
Yeah, just because there's so many potential development activities that, with Pine Street, I think if that went forward, it would be relatively straightforward. They just swapped the funding around to make sure that 100% of it went to the building facade, which we know to be eligible. And, you figure out a way that if you have 12 funding sources, you use the funding source that is legal for the building facade for that, and you use something else to get the fiber optic in there. Whereas, if you have done the planning for a project and it all looks great on paper, and ultimately, I don't know, you go to the armory and we've got a plan to preserve the facade, and a developer is attracted, and in the end, the facade somehow isn't preserved because there were changes in mid-course and it wasn't economically feasible after all, but the project wasn't worth dropping, and blah, blah, blah. At that point, it seems to be likely, based on, for instance, the research about public access, that we would need some mechanism to get the funding back. And I just don't know what the answer to that is, but I think we ought to figure out what it is before we make the final application.
Okay.
But otherwise, I would
Before they do the final application, before
Well,
they,
during at least the application
during the
process.
process, when we see what they're,
Yeah,
right.
okay,
Yeah,
all right,
because, we may ultimately decide these are great projects, but we
yeah.
shouldn't fund them this year, it's too premature. But we can figure out what's eligible or how the funds could be used for these projects.
Right, okay.
And under what circumstances we could dispense funds while still protecting the city, which is a real problem because these are long-term projects and it could
Yeah,
easily
yeah.
be, you'll have money tied up for 3-4 years on them.
Right.
Maybe far beyond that.
Also, the other thing which is mentioned on the which I was gonna mention about the other development or development incentives from the same applicant, is that the committee could decide to let them apply under one application if the city owns two, or, I don't know if HG&E is considered a city owner.
No, that would be separate.
Okay, so it would just be, the other two, so maybe we should get to that later.
So in this particular one, Madam Chairman, with the Richardson train station, should we declare it eligible until a developer is found? But by definition, well, go ahead.
Well, I think it is eligible for funding.
Yes.
It's clearly historic, it's significant, it's important, the city owns it. And I'd be prepared to say, yeah, this is eligible, and we'll just, as with so many of the other projects, we're going to have to work out the details in the course of the application.
And can you imagine that pre-development activities would be related to historic, under the historic category? That would be, because that's what I'm unsure about also.
Well, I'm unsure about it too, and I am basically, I'm basing this on my sense from this meeting that they may not just be asking for funding for pre-development
Okay.
activities.
Okay.
And if it turns out that what needs to be done to qualify, or to
Okay.
potentially qualify, is some determination that you know, we would actually be applying the money ultimately to the stonework or something, you know, I think that the office would appreciate a chance to see if that would work for them, rather than just having us declare this ineligible for technical reasons at this stage.
Absolutely. I would vote to make it eligible. We're not gonna give them any money, but, well, anyway. At this point, I would say, I would say it's eligible if they have a developer and it doesn't tie up our money. Just don't give them any money.
But this is also one where I think it's important to have the proviso that we are basing this on a provisional determination, that this does not mean that we're 100% sure that what they come up with will be eligible. But the building is
Yeah, with no way
clearly,
of knowing.
yeah.
Right, exactly.
the
Okay.
building qualifies.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so, on the, project for the Armory and, 123 Pine Street, are we putting those in the same category?
basically-
or-
Yeah,
And the other one is 163 Sergeant.
163 Sergeant did.
That's
the Armory.
And 123 Pine
123 Pine.
But with the other two,
is
it would be,
developer incentive.
it would be helpful to know if they could apply under one application. And then would the committee be comfortable with letting the city decide later which property the money should go to, since it might be unlikely that they'll get.
But they're
Or
different
no,
projects.
Well, they are different.
Yeah, I was
projects.
completely confused by this, because these are different projects.
Yeah.
But I'm
I would
talking
keep
about,
them separate.
I'm talking about 163 Sergeant Street,
Yeah,
the Armory, and 123 Pine Street, because that, originally they wanted to apply under one eligibility
Oh, okay,
form,
so
because
this
that's
one.
the whole thing, they don't know which project would attract a developer. And I thought, oh, I don't know about that, that seems,
I would like to, I
unusual.
think we should keep them separate, and if they get it, if they're, we can decide on each one. If we wanna put some money in both, or one, or neither, that, I would like to keep them separate, I think. I mean, that would be my opinion, at this
I
point in
agree.
time,
yeah, if they were basically the same project.
Yeah,
I see.
exactly.
Well, it's just interesting, because like I said, they had originally wanted to do it under one, because they didn't know which project would
Yeah,
attract a
I
developer.
understand
And so
what
when
they're-
Stuart said that, I was
I
like, oh.
understand what they're trying to do, yeah.
No, so when Stuart said, well, actually, the committee could allow them to
Well,
determine that.
yeah, well, we
We
could.
could and we might not.
No, I understand, and I understand what they wanna do,
Yeah.
but,
Well,
at this,
obviously, from their point of view,
Yeah.
more flexibility.
Yeah, of course.
exactly,
It's just not.
exactly. Yeah.
Give me money for, I'm gonna spend it on one of these 5 things, I'm not sure which one yet.
It's
At
difficult
this-
in both of these though, that they're really vague.
Yeah.
There's no real
Mm.
sense of how they would really connect to any of the CPA funding categories. Because just to say it's going to be an incentive, think about how detailed we're being in terms of, well, does electric lights or AV count? But then
Yes,
we're saying an
exactly.
incentive is going to potentially be eligible, and we really have no idea what they mean by incentive and what it would go towards. And the
So-
same thing is true of the pre-development activities, that seems really vague, because we know it has to be something that leads to impact. If it's a pre-development activity, the money goes to, but then the property is never in fact actually developed, it would have no tangible public benefit,
Yes, I agree.
which is the purpose of CPA funding.
Mhm.
So in the case that it's pre-development money, where it may or may not move forward, I don't know if that would be covered or eligibility.
Yeah, that's what my concern is.
I
No, and I'm concerned about that too, which is one of the reasons why we went and did this meeting before even talking about it. But I think this is one where, because of the concerns and the utility of being able to say that money might be available for this kind of building, it is possibly worth getting on the record that, yeah, this building is something for which money might be available, while still saying, as things develop, that, yeah, no, pre-development activities, we can't fund this, it's not sufficiently tangibly related to the goals of. But, you know, that's again is why I was saying, okay, but only if we're saying this is provisional. And as details are worked out, we may find out that, you know, this isn't eligible in its current form. If it is eligible, then yeah, we need a tangible benefit, and we need it more or less now.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so,
On the other hand, having
Yeah.
something in the record that says, we can't consider this eligible for precisely what you asked for the money for, but when the project reaches a concrete phase, you know, we find that the building is eligible, is a potential sales point, if I understood
You
Yeah,
got it
what we
right.
were
Yeah,
being pitched
exactly.
on correctly.
yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
So how do
Okay.
you phrase that?
Yeah,
So-
so, well,
Well-
for purpose, right now, we're just gonna say, go ahead and that you're eligible,
Okay, for
but,
the next phase.
and then, yeah,
We'll take
the
a
next phase.
closer look.
But ask them to
We'll see how
reframe the
confident they are
Reframe
about what
the
their
language.
application looks like.
Exactly,
I
exactly.
think it's a,
But
That'll be-
seriously, that's why I keep chanting provisional here.
So
Yeah.
we're gonna say to reframe the language, but what am I gonna tell them about, that they really need to be clear about what they wanna use the money for?
Yes, it has to be more specific.
But if they say, well, is it okay that we wanna do a feasibility study or whatever, then they go ahead, or,
That's not.
I mean, they
covered
could
under
go
CPA.
ahead and detail that in their full application, and then it could get rejected.
Exactly.
But that's not covered under CPA funding.
Well, it is covered for affordable housing, but, that type of thing, but I don't know if it is for historic.
Yeah.
That part seems weird to me for historic, and I
Yeah.
didn't see examples of it
Okay.
on the website, so.
Yeah,
Well,
and these,
yeah, they'll have to make up their minds whether they're
Well,
applying for historic or affordable
I think they
housing.
can do both, and it's going to be a tricky road to walk, because affordable housing, you know, yes, you can qualify for all sorts of things you couldn't otherwise, but if you're also applying under historic, you're still bound by all of the
Yeah.
rules.
The historic one is harder to meet than the.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so we can't do provisional, you has to be yes or no right now, so,
So,
Whether it's eligible or not.
exactly.
Why does it have to be yes or no?
It's eligible or it's not eligible.
At this point in
Well,
time,
it's probably eligible, I mean, I just,
but we can't do that, we can't do a probable, we can't do.
Well, I think we'll
I thought
say,
that we did. I'm sorry, I thought we decided this earlier, I am now,
well, so we're moving on to the next phase.
Mimi just means that for her, yes means it's provisionally yes. As
We're
long
looking
as
for
the
more
project
information,
continues
basically.
yeah,
Within the bounds of CPA.
Well, it's, all of them are,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
they're all
of them.
provisional.
Exactly.
I mean, they,
Exactly. I thought we
Right.
had agreed that we were not
right.
definitively saying that anything is.
No, we're just saying.
We're
yes
just
or-
saying they can go to the
In
next-
other words, our
next
vote
page.
Yes.
can't be provisional, it has to be a yes or no, that's all I'm saying.
Well, to move them forward,
Yeah,
To the second phase.
to get more information.
okay, so are you gonna?
So,
yes, so,
that's all they're looking for anyway.
okay,
Mhm. Well, it
so,
is what
There's a
they're
vote
looking
of
for.
eligibility on the property.
Well, if we were, maybe the reason you're confused is because if we were being really strict about this, we
no,
might say,
I'm-
no, you're not eligible, but we're giving them a chance to reframe the language.
Yeah.
To be eligible.
Yes, no, I thought that you were assigning a whole new meaning to a ruling of eligibility, which I don't think you are now, so okay.
Oh, boy.
What's that, say that again? I didn't
I'm sorry.
hear you.
We're good.
We're
We're
good?
good.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So would someone make a motion for those three projects, the train station, the armory, and 123 Pine Street?
Make a motion.
They're eligible.
No, okay, second? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Okay.
So the only one left then
Yeah,
is-
the one that's left is the, we'll say the Speranza, 348 and 337 to 348 Chestnut Street. And
Yeah.
they would like to apply for, under both historic and housing, 50,000 in each category, again. This one is the one that Mike, you came and spoke to me about, and you were right about that, it could be eligible, from what I understand, under historic on the exterior, but they can't get CPA money to rehabilitate affordable housing under CPA unless it was acquired under CPA funding. And this was not acquired with CPA funding. Remember, Mike, when you
Yes,
even
yeah.
pointed that out? So,
It's pretty
it
straightforward.
doesn't seem like it's
So,
eligible in that case.
so who owns, so the
Valley
Valley Opportunity Council?
Valley, I
Valley
have to look at that
Opportunity
again.
Council.
I think that's
POC.
yeah.
See, they didn't check rehabilitation under housing, they checked preservation, but like from what I learned and shared with you that Stuart said, preservation is a very narrow category, and it would be something more like replacing putting a whole new roof, because the current roof is, going to, risk damage, future damage. Preservation is about the future, not about, rehabilitating something in the past. Unless it was, acquired with CPA funding. That's on this chart here. Rehabilitation and restoration are under community housing. If acquired or created with CPA funds, so.
And it wasn't.
So, this project, they're asking for both dates, so I don't know
I
how.
mean, it's possible.
They qualify for one and they don't qualify for the other, is that what
Well,
you're
I
saying?
mean, I'm wondering if maybe they could qualify for work on the exterior under the historic category as rehabilitation. It seems like that might be the only possibility, but what they're talking about doing, I think, involves, was this the one about, kitchen cabinets, rehabilitating units in both buildings, having their kitchens and bathrooms upgraded with new cabinets, fixtures, and appliances, along with new finishes and fixtures throughout. The existing masonry will be repaired and repointed. So, as I was just saying, that would be like rehabilitation, of affordable housing, which is not eligible unless it was acquired by CPA funding, but maybe if they're doing something for the exterior, but does it say anything about the exterior?
Yeah, but it's not a historic building. It's not an historic building. It isn't.
Oh, I don't know where it
It's not, it's an old building.
I mean, it's
I don't know.
Historic, if the historic commission
If
votes
they
and
say-
says that it
What
is.
historic will happen there?
It was
it's a town.
constructed in
I mean, I don't know,
1911.
and that's not our job.
1911.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just, you know,
It's a
it's,
I think it is a pretty
I mean,
nice
if- but
building.
if-
but is it historical to the city
Is it his-
to have
historically
those
important?
blocks, you know? to-
Yeah, I mean, that's
Because that's
the,
part of our history.
You could apply to the whole city, the whole
That's
city
right.
is.
well, I
No,
mean,
not really, not the whole city, but
but
when
if you
there's
go,
blocks.
if you get a letter from the historical commission that says that it's historically
It's
important to
valued.
them,
Yeah,
then it's eligible.
that's right.
Yeah,
It's not, we don't
We're not
determine
the determinants.
Correct.
whether it's historically
We
important
just
or not.
gather
That's-
information
Yes,
and vote.
check the box.
That's true.
But it doesn't, do you see, I don't see anything here talking about,
That they,
the exterior or,
Oh.
The project preserves
doing-
a significant historic building that is a contributing structure in the potentially historic district of Holyoke,
Yeah,
okay,
Massachusetts.
so,
The National Park
Preservation.
Service
You know,
has
you're-
approved the part one
you're
application of
putting it
eligibility as a
in-
contributing building in the central Churchill Historic District.
So that-
it
so
also
it has
says,
been
but it
approved.
says remaining historic interior details
That's
include.
interior.
Oh, interior, yeah.
The interior stuff is clearly ineligible, from what you're saying,
Right.
but the exterior.
So the
they're
exterior,
Looking for any work on the exterior.
so we would just need
Well, I
documentation
don't know
from
if
them.
the interior
saying
is ineligible under historic, I mean, if it's, although, I don't know, I find that confusing because it's not like it's Wisteria hearse that,
Well, they said somewhere or other that they
it's a
had,
music room.
yeah, the building has had multiple renovations of the interior over time, including replacement of kitchens,
Yes,
bathrooms,
that's-
windows.
So it's not
The
historic.
majority of the historic interior trim and woodwork has been
removed, that's right, yeah, it's not
Um,
removed.
So it doesn't sound like there's much inside to be restored,
Mhm.
but the building is,
Exterior.
yeah, they describe the building in ways that sound as though there's potential there, but I can't quite tell whether they're talking about doing anything to the exterior.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like there's anything
Oh.
to do with the exterior.
5-story, 14 by 22 Bay Classical Revival brick building, has an L-shaped footprint with decorative brickwork, brownstone window sills, and a cornel brick cornice.
The only part I wondered if it could be exteriors when they say the existing masonry will be repaired and repointed.
that's
masonry.
That's probably all we can,
Is that the exterior?
I would say.
Yes.
That sounds like it
That
is.
sounds like it.
So we can,
So it's
so we can
eligible.
encourage them to do exterior, but the interior does not
It
qualify.
doesn't sound like the interior qualifies. There's some,
Libby, this is the one that we had.
Right, but I had to,
Yeah, because your
have to
father
remove
was
it.
there, but that.
my father lives there, so I wasn't sure if it would be a conflict
it does
of
say,
interest.
remaining
Oh.
historic
I
interior.
don't think so, because it's not, it's not a
Wooden
financial gain
balustrade.
to you or him,
Yeah,
so,
Perfect.
yeah.
and the remaining.
Make sure.
woodwork
Yeah, no,
interior-
right. I
It's
mean-
good to just read over that.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Sorry. what were you saying?
There is some remaining interior woodwork and tiling that may be made, but most of the work that they're talking about doing clearly, no, it's not historic anymore.
Well, can we declare them eligible as to do, some historic work as far as the
Exterior,
exterior and,
but the interior is not part of CPA funding.
Until I get a letter that says that's a historic
Right.
building, I'm gonna
Well,
say,
that-
no, I'm not
that's
gonna
right.
go for it.
Well, that's what we're
Well,
saying,
that-
all of them have the burden of proving
Right.
that.
They all
That's
have the
a given.
burden of proving that, yes.
so
I
I
mean,
guess,
they filled out the application, they click, they're checking the box that says,
I'm historic,
his,
now show us,
has
show us the money.
documentation. Right, there's a resource in the local district, or no. If no, has the historical commission made a determination that the resource is significant? They check yes.
It's significant, so what?
But no, that, they have to
They're
prove it now.
eligible.
That they're eligible
Okay.
at this point, now they have to prove that they're eligible.
I would say part of our due diligence is, let's see a copy of the letter when
Yeah.
they're submitting the
right.
application.
So what do you mean by significant?
so when you.
Doesn't
Well, it's got
matter.
a letter from
What
the
we say.
historical
We're talking
commission.
about
Yeah.
all this stuff with them.
And if they
I
can't
mean, you know,
prove, if they
look,
can't
and-
show it,
and-
They're gonna have a lot of questions, they're gonna have questions about the final application, and you're gonna
Okay.
be able, have to be able,
Yes.
yeah. explain
It's like the
it.
burden is on the applicant,
Absolutely.
you know, to show why this is
And tell
a
them,
good
make
use
sure
of
they,
CPA
make
funds.
sure they look under the CPA to
We
see
can ask
what's
a lot of
eligible,
questions.
so that they know that if they're gonna be putting cabinets, kitchen
Right,
cabinets.
their whole
I mean, it's-
application is not
yeah.
eligible, but a component of it is,
And then you subfund it.
and you
Yeah.
start looking at,
So the
okay, what?
answer is yes for part of it?
Well,
think
No, I
that-
think that was on several applications,
Yeah.
where that was just
Yeah.
part of it.
yeah.
We can tell you what we know
Okay.
will pass through CPA, and then we can tell you, you have to back that up.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
yeah.
And then there's others that we question, and you either reframe how you're approaching it, or that may be subject to being non-eligible.
Mhm.
Okay, so would
Do you
someone like to make?
I'll make a motion
Okay,
to determine its eligibility, as eligible.
is there a second?
Second?
Any more discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Opposed?
Anyone opposed? Mike?
Okay,
Mike?
so the only thing that we're tabling is the flats.
Yes, as the flats, yeah, the flats building, so everything else can move forward.
So, does that
Pretty
mean
much.
everything?
Nice to meet you.
Oh, yeah, thanks so
Okay.
much for coming.
Yeah.
Thanks so much
It's so
for
nice,
contributing.
yeah.
I told my son I'd be back by bedtime, so.
All right, cool. Please come
Well, thanks
again.
for supporting.
Yes.
So does everybody feel like the best thing to do then is for me to inform people on letterhead of this, you know, some information, and I'm sure it'll be followed up with phone calls and all that?
And then, so the deadline for this next phase is, what is that in the month? So it's,
Oh, the next,
it's November
November 30th.
30th, okay,
for the full application?
for the final,
Oh, okay.
the final application.
Right.
And so, we need to have another meeting to discuss the one thing that was tabled before the end of October, don't we?
Oh,
Yeah, we have to determine that.
I'll make a motion to have them uneligible then.
Well,
Ineligible.
which one was that?
The Flats Community Program.
Well, we may have to come back to it, you never know. No, I can see it. Okay, yeah, we have to do
So-
that by the end of the month, so.
Okay,
It
so
could be a
why are
short
we,
meeting.
so let's discuss the pros and cons of determining it eligible or ineligible.
So this is the plan.
Yeah, that,
I mean-
I mean,
If,
I think that's another one where part of their application, their, eligibility.
Yeah, you could
application
say yes and just.
Right,
say
yeah,
that
the
you
burden's
want
on them, I make a
is-
motion to
Part
tell
of
them
it
they're
is,
eligible.
sounds okay, but then there's
Right.
another part that's not, so, that's. not-
Right.
Right, read the application, read the
So they
thing,
need to
fill it
just
out.
reframe it.
Yeah, so you'll
And-
have to
and
talk to
detail.
them and say, you better check and.
They got a lot,
Oh,
they
that's
got,
the one.
Yeah, that's the one, Marco, yeah.
Okay,
So just tell them they need to read a lot about what is eligible and not eligible before they do the full application.
or they could be wasting their time.
Yeah. So, okay, so
So I
shall we,
made a motion to determine.
is that
it's
okay,
eligible.
Marco?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
Alright.
I'll make calls.
okay, so, and, will there be, Kit made the motion, so is there a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? You're all set, Marco, with that, okay.
Yes, I guess.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. That takes care of that.
okey-dokey.
All right, so item 4, discussion on possible changes to the final application. I don't know if we need to discuss that too much detail tonight, because we have time now. But go ahead, Amy, and this is
Yeah, I don't think
something that
this is
Amy's
too
concerned.
complicated,
Yeah.
because,
But that was the one I asked you to print, to look at the last 3 pages of the application.
when I spoke to Stuart, he said that even though our application, because the one part I was concerned about with the application is the part where it's asking for evidence of, this historic qualification. But even though our current application just says must be listed on macro, or like a macros listing, that's one of the documents, and that's really not enough. He said it's fine for us for this first round, just for me to tell them, no, actually, you need more than just a macros listing. So I don't know if that's one thing that I was concerned about. I don't know if there's any other concerns about the application.
I reread it and it looked to me like it either covered everything or it gave us all the room we needed to come back with final questions. And the only thing that I might add, and I think we probably don't need it at this phase, because it's kind of implied, is that explicit, if we need more information and we need a professional opinion on something, you know, we will ask you to pay for the professional to do the study and submit it. But I think we already basically have that power implied in the entire structure. You know, we can say, without this information, we can't fund this, and if you want to give it to us, that's up to you.
Right.
Mhm. Okay. That sounds good, that makes sense.
It is going to be a tough application for people.
It is,
I
yeah,
think
yeah, it's,
we need for it to be.
Great, successful applicants will put together good
Yeah.
applications and good arguments and cross their i's and dot their t's, and they're more likely to get funded.
cross
And
their eyes
one
and dot
question
their
about
Ts.
the final applications, what I have on there on the website is that with all the attachments, that they really only need to do that for one copy, because I mean,
Yeah.
otherwise it's gonna be just so many pages for
That's great.
all of you to read, that it might make more sense for me to look through that, and then if anyone else needs to look through it, they can, you know, in terms of the attachments.
I agree.
The attachments being a supporting documentation
Yeah.
and everything.
Yeah, so in other words, they are gonna have to submit all this as, you know, hard copies, but they won't have to submit all the attachments for
copies.
every
Yeah.
copy,
Yeah.
just
But
for
as
one.
long as we have it in electronic
Right.
format, so that we can access it and make sure that it really says what they say that it says.
Mhm.
That's why I gave everyone projects, because you'll get that information, and you'll be able to convey it to the rest of the committee. And the only thing that she left out when she was putting this together was the contact information for the CPC
Yeah,
coordinator, which is,
Been added.
yeah.
And I guess we weren't really gonna say more about the whole bylaw issue we were emailing about, right?
Yeah, and this is, last time, we talked about amending the committee bylaws to incorporate the material about how we conduct our hearings and stuff.
Mhm.
And I did look at the East Hampton regs, which laid it out pretty clearly, and the only real difference between their process and ours that springs to the eye immediately is that they do 4 rounds of funding every year.
Yeah.
We are struggling to do 1 round of funding.
Yeah,
so We won't
exactly.
be doing that,
No.
Yeah.
but
In the
right now it's
future,
trying to do
that is
That's a
how it
possibility.
progresses, but,
Yeah, that's a possibility.
yeah,
Yeah.
it makes it a lot simpler.
And
You mean 4 different phases?
Well, 4 is a lot, most of them do too.
No.
yeah, and I can see where, once we have this process down, rolling
Mhm.
applications might actually make things easier.
Yes.
But for this round, no, we're doing 1 set of applications.
We're-
But the documentation is not complete for you guys to review, and we will have it in your next exciting episode.
Sounds good. Okay.
Other
I
business.
lost my, so we're all set then?
It's just other business, and I just
Oh,
have a good thing
okay.
to say that, I do have heat in my office.
Right.
There you go.
It's cold in the hallway, but it's warm in the office.
Okay, enough said.
Spoiling you.
Thank you.
Enough said.
We're spoiling you over there.
Yeah, I
So
can.
there's always some weird thing going on.
Did you
This
find the
morning.
box?
Oh, yeah, that was
Oh,
all the
okay.
boxes were shoved into the closet,
Oh, okay.
including the booklets,
Okay.
which were missing after the event. But, this afternoon when I came in through the back of City Hall, and I walked up to the 3rd floor, the ballroom level, there were chairs blocking the, top of the stairs. So I literally had to move the chairs to get into the office.
Oh.
I don't know, the honest with that.
We just don't know what's going on in this building.
Yeah, and nobody seems to know. The hosts know.
Yeah.
Camera's still rolling.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Be careful about that.
Somebody that lives in the tower that we don't know about.
Oh, there you go. Hey,
Okay.
rearrange his chairs at night.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so, the only other thing then is, our next meeting, and I'm not sure what our next meeting, how that will shape up. I mean, we're pretty much up to date except for the finished rules
Yeah, finish.
and
rules and
regulations. And other than that, I mean, minutes, where we have, and probably the budget, we should probably stay on top of the budget. So I guess you know, we should probably meet sometime in November, at least
Yeah.
once. And then after that, because then we're gonna have the full applications, and then starting in December, so then, yes.
Yeah, what about, we're waiting for answers from the historical commission, don't you think we should have those answers before the November meeting?
I would like to invite that gentleman that Mike Sullivan talked
No,
about.
I understand that, but the local Hoyoke Historic Commission,
Right,
the things that we've asked Marcos to obtain opinions on.
right.
Well, we moved
It's
that
going
project
to-
forward.
Yes.
They
it's-
have to just, they
yeah.
just have to
It's gonna have
provide
to
that
be,
information in their final.
yeah, in the full
Application.
application.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely, it says it right on the
Right.
eligibility form.
Right.
You have to show, we're giving you the benefit of the doubt now, but when
Right.
it comes to the full application, it says right underneath, you must provide documentation of your historical,
Right.
claim. It says that right underneath there, so,
And if it's not an application,
and if they can't do that.
I don't think they'll
then-
get any
You can
votes.
vote one way or the other, that's all.
Yeah, right, and plus the fact they might not even apply if they can't get that.
Right.
Right.
So they might not finish the,
Right.
just because they're doing this, that doesn't mean they're gonna get
Because
it.
I am gonna call on Maple Street and tell him if he wants to move forward, then he has to know that he's gotta do a historic restriction. And if he doesn't choose to do that, then he may not move forward.
Right.
So I'm gonna talk to him first.
I
Well, I'm gonna talk to him about it and let him know that he has that option.
mean, he's gonna have to invest so much additional money.
Not my problem.
Right.
I'm gonna give him the information, that's all.
Why do it? Leave it alone, I mean,
Right.
paint it and let it go at that.
Well, he can do what he wants
That's
to do.
Yeah,
his
you're right.
decision.
He
Yeah,
can
it's
do what he
his
wants to do,
decision.
yeah.
Right.
But if he wants to, then he's got the option.
Yeah.
Okay, so November, we want to stay away from, Veterans Day is a Monday, and Thanksgiving, of course, we know what that means.
Do you wanna go Wednesday, or no?
Oh, yeah, we said Wednesday.
Well, I thought that was,
We could do
Wednesday works for me too, I don't care. Either one.
Wednesdays should be fine with me.
You guys, is Wednesday okay for you guys?
Like when-
It's okay for me, my November may get crowded, and I'm not sure about any dates at the moment, but
Well, besides a crazy November.
The Wednesday.
but Wednesday in general is fine.
Fine,
the
okay.
Wednesdays.
And that's 6:45, right?
I signed up for a church thing on Wednesday nights at 7 o'clock.
You gotta resign.
No, wait,
You
it's
gotta
only,
resign.
it's done at the 14th, they're done the 14th, it was only a 6-week thing, so at that point, I didn't know. But, let's see,
So we do the end of November,
yeah.
and we'll probably have some
For
applications.
some
in.
reason, my calendar does not, oh, here's Thanksgiving, okay, so we don't wanna do the
That's the
21st.
Yeah, it's early this year.
Yes, okay, so how about Wednesday, the 28th?
Good.
Okay.
Do
Wait,
you
let
wanna
me
wait
just,
that long?
No,
No?
oh, I have another commitment.
Why
No,
don't
I
we,
mean-
why don't we wanna wait that long?
Do you wanna
You
go?
gotta get this stuff digested and voted upon. Why wait? Why wait?
We're not
What's
voting
that?
on anything.
Well, just
Unless we
any
have
progress of how we're doing, just a
At that
refresher.
point in time, we won't even have received, the full applications will just be coming in by that
I
time.
have another commitment
Oh,
on
on the
November
28th.
28th, unfortunately, it's not every month, but.
How about the Monday? I mean, we could still do Monday at,
okay,
Let's
that's it.
see.
That's
26?
Yeah, I could do the 26th.
Okay.
November 26th,
We'll just go back to Monday for now.
Monday at 6.
Yeah,
November 26th at 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock, and we're just
We
gonna
have to
do.
think about the Wednesday at 6:45, because it's kind of late,
It is late.
yeah? And we're gonna be getting out of here almost at 9, so we
Yeah.
might have to keep it Monday, but not do the third Monday,
Oh,
because it
that's okay.
conflicts.
Well, Elaine, did you say
But
your
you can't do
commitment
Mondays,
was?
can you?
Well,
almost
starting in
over.
January,
Almost
I
over?
can't do
Your
it.
Wednesday
But I
commitments
can
are
do
almost
it
over?
Oh, yeah, the
November,
14th
December.
Of November?
Okay.
November.
And we can come back to the table.
So
and
we're
then-
good.
Well,
on the
So,
26th.
for November,
Wednesday-
December, we're good.
Well, for Wednesdays at 6 o'clock then, barring this coming,
No, that's not, I go to yoga every Wednesday
At
at
6
6:30.
o'clock.
6:30, I'm done right here in Waverly, I can be here in 10 minutes.
You're gonna have to quit.
So are we
Sorry.
saying,
That's not
are we
happening.
saying
You gotta quit.
6 PM
Priorities.
on Monday, November
6
26th?
PM, Monday the
Yeah,
26th,
that's good.
okay? All right,
Okay.
thank you very much, and if we can't meet in the city council chambers, we will meet, and we'll be able to meet at the high school, which
Oh,
I think.
So location to be determined.
Yes,
Oh, you mean
location.
we won't meet here?
What's wrong with here?
Well, you like it here?
Sure.
Fine.
It's
If
better
you're
for me
okay with-
because it's convenient.
Okay,
but-
if you're okay
How
with
Can
close
we make
is
a
the
motion to
high
adjourn yet?
here, no.
Although, is the high school really close?
Mike's up on his seat.
Okay, so
Let the
that's.
town tell me.
Okay, so your preference is
I
city,
won't dark.
okay, excuse me, wait a minute. Your preference is city council chambers first, here second then?
Yes.
Okay, and then, all right, okay. That's, I didn't know that, I thought we liked the school committee.
It's the
High
Holy,
school.
it's just called the Holyoke High School?
Yeah, no, it's a bit, I don't know, it's really nice.
It's
Oh, well, I'd love to.
Well, it's a beautiful room.
Yeah, so, but if you guys like it here, that's fine with me.
So either one is fine over there,
Gotta
both.
make a motion, I always.
Well, if we want to do the other one, that's fine too.
If we have to, it'll be third.
Okay,
Is
I make
parking-
a motion, we adjourn.
Second it.
All right, all there, aye. Thank you, everybody.